Hi everyone, and welcome to this coding tutorial. So this is an opportunity for us to focus on coding dialogue and run through a couple of examples together to hopefully get used to the idea of using a template to code different categories of dialogue before you do so in your own inquiry. You should have already watched the sections tutorial video above, and that describes what coding is, why we use it, as well as some of the different types of observations that you can use during your own inquiry. If you haven't yet watched that video, I recommend that you do so first. So you can just pause this one, go back, watch that one, and once you've done so, revisit this one, and then we'll try out a few examples together. So your objective for this coding tutorial is to really just familiarize yourself with the different templates and tools and coding process as well by doing some examples so that you can really just see what it looks like in practice. I promise that coding is one of those things that sounds and looks more complicated than it really is, but applying a coding scheme is really just a way to track dialogue that is happening in your setting to better understand what's working and where gaps may exist ultimately in order to improve your own practice. So here's an overview of the coding scheme, which you'll probably have seen before. These are the different codes or categories of dialogue, and you should use these and review these different categories to see which ones align with what you want to focus on in your inquiry. I'm going to run through the first 5 categories there before we get into the examples of how to code. The first dialogue category is build on ideas, which is when a participant builds on, elaborates, clarifies, or comments on their own or others' ideas. Learners might elaborate or evaluate or improve their own idea or someone else's through adding more information or also clarifying what someone else has said. Normally, this type of dialogue happens following another learner's contribution, and ideally, it should also happen spontaneously without students waiting for the teacher's invitation to do so. Some examples of this code are included on the screen here. Mary's idea made me think about why the character would do that. My idea was similar to Ahmed's. I wrote that flowers would make the best present. I've got an idea that nobody has mentioned yet. What I meant earlier was... This second example is linked to the previous one. So the category invite to build on ideas is when a teacher or another student explicitly asks someone to build on another person's idea. Some examples of this code are included on the screen here, like, what do you think of Ava's idea? Do you agree or disagree with what Chris said? Is your idea similar to Manuel's? I would like you all to think of an example that hasn't been mentioned yet. The third category is challenge, which focuses on the ways in which students question and disagree with ideas that they hear. The important thing to note here is that not all ideas are equal, and so challenging ideas encourages learners to consider which ideas have the most merit. And it's also very important, very critical to model how to challenge politely and respectfully, because it is the ideas that should be challenged and not the person. And ideally also reasons should be given for challenges as well. Some forms of challenge simply stops the dialogue right in its tracks rather than extends it. There are a few examples of challenge on the screen here. You can see like, I disagree, or are you sure? And then this slide expands on what I was just saying as well about how to challenge in a way that really supports learning. So the example on the left here is when challenging doesn't support learning. The teacher asks, what is your answer? Ollie, a student, replies, my main answer is 2/12, which is the same as 1/6. The teacher says, 1/6 isn't right. Ollie responds, isn't it? The teacher says, no. Ollie stops and whispers, and then there's a long pause. So we can really see here that Ollie probably loses confidence to carry on and gets no informative feedback or encouragement from the teacher at all. So the example of the right, as you can see, is much different than that. The teacher says, I'm talking about having and we're sharing by 4. Why? Is there a relationship between those two that we already know? Nadia responds, because 4 is in the 2 times table. The teacher responds, I'm not sure how it's going to help us here in sharing by 4. How could we share by 4 using having? Zach responds by having twice. So in this example, you can see that the teacher challenges the student's response respectfully by expanding and carefully rephrasing the question. The fourth dialogue category is make reasoning explicit. And this is where when students explain, justify, or develop their own ideas or others' ideas. And this can be in response to an invitation to do so or not. Some examples of this are included on the screen, such as I think, because, if this happened, then, and so on. And the last category of dialogue that we'll review before getting into our examples of coding is invite reasoning, which is an invitation to others to explain or justify their own or others' ideas. So keywords for this category might include why or how, or can you explain your thinking further?